So here we go again, eh? As of the 30th of November this year, we will be required once again to wear face masks or face coverings in shops and on public transport. And may I just take this opportunity to say, not this time, Boris. Now, it's funny that in the last 48 hours or so since this announcement was made and since we were told this was going to happen, I have developed a rare condition. In fact, so rare that I think I'm the only person in the world that suffers from it, that actually makes me exempt from wearing a face mask in a public place. I know, everyone out there is probably thinking I'm some sort of selfish arsehole, or I'm just doing this to make a point, or I'm some sort of conspiracy nut job, and that's fine. That's fine. I've been told I've been a conspiracy theorist so many times throughout this pandemic that it's kind of water off a duck's back now. And just to clarify, I've never once said that this was some sort of, Bill Gates funded tracking device, or that we were being injected by 5G radiation from the lizard overlords or fucking whatever, I don't know. I do genuinely believe there was a virus, but even the most rational, logical, thought out arguments against some of the rules, regulations and restrictions that have been put in place over the last 2 years have been met with the idea that somehow we are conspiracy theorists, and we're denying that the fact that COVID-19 existed. And that's simply not the case. I don't doubt this virus exists, but what I do doubt is that if we are to fall into this cycle of just bowing to the demands of the government when they pick and choose what rules and restrictions to introduce and to reintroduce and to remove, then we will never get the level of freedom that we previously enjoyed back. In fact, I think in many respects it's sort of a bit too late to fully protect our previous freedoms. But what it is our moral obligation, our moral duty to do as citizens of a apparently free country is to fight back. Not in a violent way, not even maybe in a protest way, but in a passive way, in terms of just simply not complying where we believe the rules are, illogical. And let me just explain very quickly before I dig into that a bit deeper why I think this particular rule is illogical. It seems that they're using the existence of this new variant in order to help push the agenda to get people to have booster jabs. Fine, I've had 2 jabs, and you know what, until this announcement was made last week, I was going to probably have my booster as and when it came to be my turn. At the moment I am, in all honesty, undecided. But there's certain rumours, certain things that are being put out there that say that this particular new variant is in fact resilient to the vaccine, which is why we should go back to having mandated face coverings in public places and indoor shops and whatever else. So what is it? If you're trying to speed up the vaccine booster rollout in order to help combat this new highly contagious strain of the virus, then obviously you believe that the vaccines work. And if the vaccines work, considering we have across the world probably the highest or one of the highest proportions of vaccinated people, and it would only be higher realistically if people who had decided they didn't want it for whatever reason had taken it up, it doesn't make any sense. There's no logic to it. And if you wish to wear a mask, as people have been doing, ever since the mask mandate was lifted, people have decided and made up their own mind about the level of risk that they are willing to take on, or the level of risk they believe they pose to either themselves or to others, and they think that wearing a face covering is beneficial to their health or to the health of others, then great. That's absolutely fine, and I've never wanted it to be a them and us thing. These people who have worn a face mask throughout ever since the mandate has been lifted, and they want to continue to do so until they're comfortable not to, if that ever happens, then that's absolutely fine. You keep doing what you believe. But what we don't need, and what we shouldn't have, and what we shouldn't accept is that people who have made up their own minds that they don't need to wear a face covering, that there has no real benefit to them. And some of that might be based in certain bits of medical research. Some of it might be based purely on, objective opinion. But if you have decided that wearing a face covering is not of reasonable, tangible benefit to you or to others around you, or maybe you've decided, as I believe, that sticking a bit of cloth over your mouth and nose every time you go indoors, this is a bit of cloth that's probably been balled up in your pocket of your jeans or your coat, because, you know, despite what we'd all like to think, we're not getting a fresh, disposable, surgical-grade mask out of our pocket, are we, every time we go inside, you know, Sainsbury's or whatever. What we're doing is we're just going, hang on a minute, I've got one in my pocket here somewhere, and sticking it around our face, which has to be more unhealthy than just not wearing a mask. If us, as people who are sceptical of the benefits of wearing a mask, or indeed have just made up our own minds, made our own internal risk assessment and decided that we're not going to do this, if we suddenly just start conforming, either because all the government said so, therefore we've got to do it, or possibly a worse reason still, and I hear this from a lot of people, and you know what, these are people that I like and people that I love and people that I have respect for in so many other ways, but people who will say, well, I won't wear it because, I will wear it because it's just easier, isn't it? It's just easier to stick a mask on than it is to, you know, claim that you're exempt or just say that you're not wearing one, or in some way, in a very most passive way possible, fight back against this sort of ongoing, rolling, you know, switch on, switch off of regulations. I think it's time that we do fight back in a very passive way and we just cease to comply with these restrictions. Like I say, if you want to wear a mask and you feel that's beneficial to you or to those around you, then go for it. I've never wanted it to be a them and us. But if you will go from not wearing a mask for the last few months because you've made a personal risk assessment to wearing a mask just because the government have said so in an illogical way, for the reasons I mentioned previously, and also for the situations in which mask wearing should take place, i.e. in shops and on public transport, but not in pubs, restaurants, cafes, bars, cinemas and everywhere else, then you're part of the problem, in my opinion. It's not virtuous to be submissive to these regulations. You're not doing the right thing merely by, you know, subjecting yourself to the flippant changes in regulation that for some reason get brought about by the powers that be. If you want to be virtuous, then stand up for what you truly believe. And if what you truly believe is that wearing a mask makes a difference, then keep doing that. But if you truly believe it has no benefit, or indeed, as I pointed out, maybe a negative effect on your health or the health of those around you, then stand up for what you believe and stop complying. Because otherwise, we're going to be in this forever. And every little time there's a blip or, you know, some sort of increase in some level of something somewhere, we're going to be told what to do, and they're going to basically accept this as a power that is now instilled within the government themselves, who, lest I remind you, are there for the benefit of the citizens. They are servants. They are public servants. They are there to represent us. We are not there to bow to every whim and rule change, you know, at the drop of a hat. And more interestingly, this variant, the name of which I can't remember, and so I'm going to call it the Optimus Prime variant. This variant, which is, apparently super mutant, which I think they just say because it sounds really fucking scary, doesn't it? And if that's not going to get you running down to your local vaccine hub, then I don't know what will. But this super mutant variant, which feasibly might be slightly more transmissible than the previous variant, but it has also been proven by the only scientific data we have thus far to be less harmful, with more mild symptoms and lower hospitalisation and death rates. So if we have a combination of a largely vaccinated population, a huge number of people who may or may not have been vaccinated but do have antibodies from having the virus previously, and this new variant, which, let's face it, I'm no virologist, but from everything I've read, every time there is a mutation in a virus, it becomes weaker. And the reason it mutates is because it has less and less people to infect, so it becomes a weaker strain of the virus. So we have more vaccinations, a greater level of immunity, a more transmissible but weaker version of the virus. And yet we're thinking about increasing the number of restrictions and rules and regulations and mandates around our own behaviours. And that's not to bring me on to one final point, a story that almost as soon as this variant had been announced, we started seeing stories perpetuated by teachers' unions saying that school may have to finish early this year for Christmas. What a surprise. Now, I know teachers who are highly dedicated people who work dozens of hours overtime in order to ensure that their children have the best possible experience in their classes. I also know teachers on the other end of the spectrum who do the absolute minimum to get by, and that's not exclusive to teachers, of course. We know that happens in all jobs, in all positions, and in all sectors. But why was it no surprise to me that the second there's talk of a new variant or new restrictions, that suddenly, oh look, we might have to tag an extra week onto the beginning of the school Christmas holidays? I wonder whose idea that was. I'll leave that with you. Stay safe, stay sane, and do the right thing. All the best.